This is a little bit of an older article, but it's a good one. From GB News. Labour launching big strategy switch to counter reform surge after damning poll leaves Keir Starmer on the brink. Labour Party's rolling out its big switch to its electoral strategy as opinion polls suggest Keir Starmer could hemorrhage hundreds of seats in the next general election. Strategists have adopted an incumbency-first model to protect sitting MPs in 2029, giving up hope on snatching new seats from Reform or the Tories. Labour's Deputy Leader Lucy Powell told MPs organisers will offer workshops on how to take credit for improvements in the local area, or how to take credit for shit they didn't even do. She also urged Labour MPs to stop infighting amid continued discontent with Sir Keir's leadership. It's a big switch organisationally and politically, a Labour source telling The Guardian. There's tools and training the party's providing, but Lucy and Anna Turley, Labour Party chairwoman, are leading some political work about what else is needed and how MPs can support and share best practice. However, the change in strategy came just hours before YouGov revealed Labour had slumped to third in the opinion polls. Labour's support has halved since the 2024 general election, collapsing from 34% to just 17%. The Tories edged out Labour for second, with 19% of the vote, putting them 7 points behind Reform UK. Starmer's Labour is also facing a challenge from the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, with the progressive parties receiving 16 and 15% respectively. This keeps up, they're looking at a blowout of Labour, possibly of the Tories, maybe even for the Lib Dems and the Greens. But yeah, government is considering banning X in the UK just because of embarrassing things like Keir Starmer in a bikini. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. This is interesting. You know, I mentioned that with the capture of Venezuelan oil, Russia and China are now beholden to the US to get a strong supply of crude oil. There's a bloke on Twitter, Ken Chow, I think is the way he pronounces his name, author of the China Crash Chronicle. He's got some interesting things here. I want to take a look at these, and he's got a short video. Trump is about to bankrupt China the Soviet Union way. He just set a Soviet-style trap for China. Trump plans to raise US defense spending by 50% to $1.5 trillion in 2027, about 5% of GDP. This isn't about Russia. Russia's economy can't keep up. This is aimed squarely at China. It's Reagan versus the Soviet Union 2.0. Beijing now faces a dead-end choice. Match US spending, crush an already fragile economy. Don't match it and fall behind militarily and lose face globally. Either way, China loses. That's exactly how the arms race bankrupted the USSR. And that's why Beijing is panicking about this decision. If true, that would be something. But we shall have to see if Trump actually wants to, if Trump actually does end up raising defense spending by 50%. We can see from, I believe this is a Truth Social entry, $1.5 trillion. Allow us to build the dream military that we've long been entitled to. More importantly, it'll keep us safe and secure regardless of foe. Ken's got a video here breaking down the numbers, the strategy, why Beijing can't escape the trap. And he speaks a bit slow, so I'm going to put this on 1.5 speed. Let's take a look here.
Hey friends, pay attention to this, because President Trump just made a decision that could quietly decide the fate of China's economy. Not tomorrow, not next year, but structurally, irreversibly. Trump just announced plans to raise US defense spending by 50%, pushing it to $1.5 trillion by 2027. That is about 5% of US GDP.
I don't think anybody really noticed that. I don't think a lot of people have been paying attention. They've been so distracted by Venezuela, by Minnesota child care centers, nurseries, and also by someone getting shot for attempting to run over ICE agents. That'd be easy to miss something like this.
And no, this isn't about Russia. Russia doesn't have the money to compete. This is aimed at exactly one country, China. What you are watching right now is Reagan versus the Soviet Union, rebooted for the 21st century. And let's be clear about the scale. The United States already spends more on defense than anyone on Earth, roughly $1 trillion a year. And Trump is
That
saying
is a lot of
that is not
money.
enough. He wants to push it to 1.5 trillion. That single decision alone would put US military spending far above China and Russia combined.
The world is running at 5x speed and people can hardly keep up. That is true. And speaking of keeping up, I should catch up on right-wing feminist activists. They do exist, Mars. Apparently. They're rare, but I think they do exist. Oh, Islam. Lol, makes sense now, yeah. By the way, I am sorry to those of you who are watching over on Rumble. I am trying to keep up with chat, but for whatever reason, it's not letting me pop out the Rumble chat so that I can keep it on a separate window. I've got 2 monitors to work with already. Desperately need a third one, but don't really have the space for the third one. It's a whole thing. So just bear with me, everybody. We're trying to work the bugs out here. Anyway, let's get back to the video here.
And President Trump wasn't subtle about why. He said, this is about building the military America should have always had. A military that no enemy can challenge, anywhere, anytime. He also signed orders telling defense contractors to speed up production, because even America's military industry is not moving fast enough.
That could pose some problems with quality control. I mean, we already have issues with quality control with military equipment, but that could possibly exacerbate things, so don't be surprised if you start seeing stories coming out in the so-called mainstream press about defective equipment and, you know, more of those stories about $5,000 toilet seats and whatnot.
For what is coming. So this is not symbolism. This is industrial scale preparation. Now here's the part China doesn't want to talk about. An arms race is not simply a military problem. It is an economic stress test. And history is very clear about who fails that test. During the Cold War, many Americans believed that the Soviet Union was unbeatable. Centralized control, total mobilization, massive military output.
Except it wasn't really. It was kind of a joke. The whole thing was just sort of creaking and lurching along, especially since the Brezhnev days. And it was all just starting to crumble and fall apart. You saw that with massive displays like the Chernobyl incident. And then everything that happened with Perestroika and Yeltsin and the reformers getting in and just... it all just started falling apart shortly after first it was Chernobyl, limped along a bit more, then the fall of the Berlin Wall. Just, that was it. Everything else was just decline and fall after that. So a lot of critical moments in history. I don't know. We haven't really had any of those with China. I wonder if we ever will. If it'll just be one of those things where all of a sudden one day we just wake up and it's like, oh, China's bankrupt now. They've had it. They're done. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I almost wonder if it's all just going to go out with a whimper rather than a bang.
Sound familiar? But Reagan's team saw something different. They saw an economy that was rigid, inefficient, and already slowing down. So they forced the Soviets into a choice. Spend massively to keep up and bankrupt yourself, or don't keep up and lose global power.
What if the Chinese just don't take the bait? I mean, what if they just are like, yeah, we're not doing that. I mean, in a way, they'll have called our bluff and the Americans have spent all this money for nothing. I mean, you probably get some benefit out of it, but what if they just decide, yeah, we're not doing that? I mean, it would be quite unexpected, though I don't know if they would really do that. I think more than likely they would, like a moth to a flame, they would probably end up trying to outspend, and they would ultimately break themselves.
Wait, you lose. And that is exactly what happened. The Soviet Union chose to compete militarily, and it collapsed economically. Now China is standing in the exact same corner. If China matches a 50% increase in US defense spending, where does that money come from? By issuing some bonds in US dollars that you cannot print and nobody trusts? And let's not forget, the Chinese economy is already in free fall.
Yeah, and they try to print bonds or sell anything else in, their own currency, gold back. If they try to pull something like what Gaddafi did with Libya, they really will get fucking regime changed. Because in the end, even they are not untouchable from the powers of world finance. China's more subversive cyber attacks, collapsing her infrastructure seems more likely. That would not surprise me. A lot of people with those sorts of powers seeing a sinking ship with China, and then just deciding, you know what, if we're going down, we're going to take as many people with us as possible. We're just going to burn it all to the ground. So yeah, that would not surprise me.
The property sector is broken and still collapsing. That crisis is far from over. Local governments are drowning in debt.
We have a video about that.
Youth unemployment is structural. Consumption is terribly weak.
I think the youth unemployment rate is still north of something like 50% or something like that. There's like whole generations of young people in China and they can't get jobs. Like, there are no jobs for them. So you've got whole generations of young people who are they're unemployed. They have nothing else to do with their time because there's just no work for them. A large amount of idle young people, that's a problem. That can be a very destabilizing force for any government.
Fertility rate has hit record low, even lower than the 1960s during the Great Famine, which caused tens of millions of Chinese to die of starvation. Today's fertility rate is lower than that. Plus, the military does not generate economic returns. It consumes resources.
Yeah, that's another thing. Their population has been so out of balance. They've got more men than women, and no one is getting married and having children. Or almost no one's getting married and having children. It's bad. It's really bad over there.
Every Chinese yuan poured into weapons is a yuan not spent stabilizing the economy and helping its 600 million poor Chinese who are still living on basic subsistence. So matching the US risks crushing China's finances. But here's the other side. If China doesn't match it, well, then China falls behind militarily, fast. And that destroys Xi Jinping's core political narrative.
Okay, now you started to make a fair point. I mean, if you go by the whole sort of honor and face-bound type culture, could possibly mean a loss of face if they don't try to keep up. And for a lot of Southeast Asians, yeah, a loss of face is just unacceptable. Death would be more preferable. Death before dishonor. People speculate the population is lower than the government reports too. Yes, possibly by as much as half. There's always been that line in the public consciousness that China's over 1 billion people. And now there's speculation that, yeah, no, they don't really have 1 billion people. More like maybe 500,000 at most, 600 million people. Which would make sense. It would start to explain a lot of things, like the ghost cities that we saw popping up in previous years. I don't know if anybody remembers that about China. I think 60 Minutes even visited a ghost city. And they were trying to hype it up in spinners. Oh, well, we're going to have a lot of people in here, so we're building early, and we're building big, and, we're showing what we're capable of once we get all these people moved in. I bet you more than anything it was tofu construction. All of it's fallen apart. Probably all been knocked down since. Because they don't have the people. They don't have the people. I encountered what I could only describe as a quasi-ghost city when I was traveling in China. It was actually, I had a chance to tour Shanghai Ocean University and the area around it. Now, the university itself there were people there, but from what I recall, it was always fairly quiet. And it was explained to us that either, they're on break or, students were away in their dorm studying or something like that. There were certain areas like a dining hall that was fairly crowded, but it still seemed for such a massive university. So many of the spaces we went into were very sparsely populated and used. GXDIWPWMBV, thank you so much for the follow. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, so I just sort of spelled it out. And so, the red flags for that sort of thing weren't really raised when I was touring university ground, because there always seemed to be enough people, enough students, enough officials to sort of allay any sort of suspicions. But I think that they were a fairly understaffed, underpopulated university even back then. Just looking back after, and this was 2015 when I was there. So this was going on about 10 plus years ago now. The thing that really started to raise the red flags for us was the area around Shanghai Ocean University. Because they had these sort of boulevards and streets. They had a hotel. I remember we stayed at it. It was called the UA High. It was an independent hotel. It was a fairly decent business class hotel. Fairly quiet. Not a whole lot of people coming in and out. I think my tour group, I was there for international study. I think we were probably the biggest group that they had for those particular days. Beds were hard as a rock and the mattresses were way too thin. Showers weren't very well constructed either. Felt like we were about to flood out the entire bathroom if we took a shower for too long. But I remember with a lot of the shops surrounding the university, there wasn't really a whole lot there beyond like the main stretch of road leading into the university's driveway and entrance. You had a little mom and pop place that I think served breakfast and maybe lunch, possibly dinner, I don't know. Had a really good breakfast. Sort of a blend of American and Chinese fusion, so or like American French Chinese fusion. They make these crepes out of scrambled egg, and I think they put in bacon or ham or something like that. And then for a little bit of texture, they added in wontons. It was actually quite good. Made a delicious breakfast. That was just a little mum and pop place that operated there. I think they had an independent pizza place. I hated the pizza in China. I absolutely loathe the pizza in China because they kept putting bloody corn kernels in all of the pizzas we ordered, and I hated that. Tasted disgusting too. I think they had a barber's and maybe a couple of clothing shops, and I think maybe a konbini and a karaoke place. I don't know. I'm stretching to remember what happened 10 years ago, chat, so bear with me. But yeah, beyond that, you get away from that main stretch of road, turn the corner practically, and you would see the stretch of what looked like empty storefronts, and then a couple of mid-rise office tower blocks, and then what was supposed to be a train station, a subway station. Those storefronts were empty. The office towers were also empty, completely empty, no tenants at all. And I think the train station, we weren't really allowed to approach it because they said it was closed. And me and a couple of schoolmates there, this was when I was studying for my MBA, we were with one of our guides, and we kind of pulled him aside and we said, "Oh, mate, there's no people around here at this park. We haven't noticed anybody coming out of the office towers, and they're telling us we can't even go inside the train station. We're kind of getting the vibe that this is a bit of a ghost city." And he just sort of, nodded his head ever so slightly and whispered, "It's like, yeah, it is sort of. It's, it started out as this big grand real estate development project, and the developers got caught in some sort of corruption scandal, and so the whole project ended up getting hastily finished and sort of scrapped, and this is all that's left of it. And yeah, this is all there is to the area around Shanghai Ocean University. The only thing that's really been built up is the university itself. Everything else, they just sort of rushed to finish it, or they've left it unfinished. But yeah, this is it. He's like, yeah, it's kind of a ghost city, sort of. So we were all kind of taken aback by all of that. Because, I mean, it's jarring. You see structures like this, you expect them to be sort of populated with people and shops and commerce and activity, through some sort of period of the day, but even, at night, if it's a bit of a night spot, like, karaoke place. Well, none of that was happening here. It was just, we really felt like it was kind of small town, almost backwater vibes. Even at night, a lot of the street lamps weren't even coming on to light up the street and, give you some illumination at night. So it was all just, it felt so weird. It almost felt like you were sort of walking through a Potemkin village of sorts.
Entire Dongsen Xijiang, East rising, West declining theory depends on one thing: China catching up to the United States, especially in military terms. Lose that momentum, and the whole narrative collapses. International confidence in China's future collapses with it.
And they lose a lot of face in the process, and they especially can't have that.
Few remaining partners, they drift away, and China looks weaker by the year. So Beijing has no good option. Follow America into an arms race and risk economic collapse even faster. Refuse to follow and accept strategic decline. That is the trap. The same trap that broke the Soviet Union. And I'm sure President Trump knows it. This is not emotional, this is not ideological, this is cold structural power politics. And that is why this decision matters. Not because of the sheer size of the number, but because once an arms race starts, China loses either way. Compete or don't compete, spend or fall behind. History has already run this simulation. And it didn't end well for the last system that tried. So watch Beijing closely. The panic won't show up in speeches. The panic will show up in Beijing's budgets. And when it does, you'll know exactly where this is heading. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, they got a fairly decent poker face about this sort of thing, where they'll never admit it publicly, because again, that would be a loss of face. Damien, thank you for the follow. I thought you were already following, but thank you.